Hello and welcome to our third backyard conversation. We are in July of 2020, and I am so thankful for technology that we can continue these conversations and wrap them up in a different format. We have been meeting for several weeks here in our backyard in Nashville, Tennessee. Understanding whiteness, becoming anti-racist has sort of been the tagline of what we've been doing. And a series of weather events plus COVID has prevented us from finishing the series. But in our last week, we are so close to finishing, and I know that many of you have asked if you could be informed about how to raise anti-racist children and for some parenting tips. And so I am making this video so that you can finish out the course. And so as we continue to move forward, I just want to begin by reminding us, and by way of looking back, that we have talked for a couple of weeks about America's foundations, that we are rooted in white supremacy from our very beginning, from our very history as a country, and that for many of us, our comfort and sense of normal sort of controls our culture. And that part of the work of beginning this journey of anti-racism is to confront all of our history, the good, the bad, the ugly. And that means that we get to talk about our gorgeous ideals, but we also acknowledge our horrible hypocrisy. It means that we notice our sort of ruthless individualism, and we also celebrate our legacy of communal sacrifice. It also means that we talk about how brave people have been in our past, our heroes, but we also acknowledge that at times we can act with real apathy and with cowardice in the face of oppression and in protecting others. And so my position is that if we don't face all of our history, then we can't expel white supremacy from white culture. And so I'd like to sort of reclaim patriotism and to remind us that deep patriotism requires investing and divesting. It requires championing the things that we believe in and standing up for what we believe in, but it also means protesting things that are bad or that are wrong. And so before we jump into tonight's work, I just want to remind us that there are some tempting responses when we have been confronting all the things we've been confronting in our country. The events that precipitated these backyard conversations even were in May, a series of revelations, some from the past and some current, when George Floyd was killed by police officers, when Ahmaud Arbery was really gunned down by white supremacists pair in Georgia, and when Breonna Taylor was killed in her own bed when police used a no-knock warrant. This sort of garnered and produced a widespread response throughout our nation. People took to the streets, people started protesting, and lots of folks who have never really thought about racial injustice leaned in and said, I think I want to know more. I think I want to know what's going on. How do I respond to this? How do I take responsibility for what's going on here? And so of all the responses that we could have, some of them are that you've shown up in this yard, that you've asked questions, that you're beginning to read. But I want to acknowledge that for some of us, there can be a response where we just sort of feel bad or feel sad, and then we sort of move on. Others of us will really engage in learning, but that learning is problematic if it continues to center us. So for instance, you might join an all-white book club. That is a great place to start, but it can't be the end of your journey, right? So a tempting response is to like dive into learning new things, but sort of leave it there. Some of us too might begin to ask our friends to educate us, to teach us. And so I call this asking someone else to pay for your education. So we could sort of like phone a Black friend and ask them to teach us what we don't know and explain all of American history to us, or tell me all about what it's like to live in your skin as you go throughout your day. That's a tempting response, but we need to take responsibility for our own education. Another response I think that some of us might find ourselves engaging in is to sort of talk to one safe friend, but to stay largely silent with all your other community about your growing awareness, the commitments you might be making. So in other words, you sort of begin to preserve your status quo And you only really share this journey that you're on with one or two other people. One of the most powerful things that white folks can do if they begin the work of anti-racism is to share what they're learning with their friends, to speak up in their community, not to necessarily like confront things or topple down systems or take these huge brave action steps. I hope that comes down the road. But one of the things we can do at the beginning of that journey is to like be honest with our community about the things we're learning, the things we're growing in, the ways that we're grieved, the ways that the injustice that we're learning about, to just share that story with more than one person. Another response is that we can really speak up boldly sort of in a space like this. So if you go to like a workshop on racism or diversity or something, you really boldly sort of speak up. But at work, in voting, in your school or in your neighborhood, you turn a blind eye. So one of the phrases that people like to use is YIMBY or NIMBY. So like yes in my backyard or no in my backyard, not in my backyard. And one of the things that's easy to do is to like speak up in certain environments, but when the rubber hits the road, when it's about your neighborhood, you're like, no, I don't really want it here. I'm all for justice and equality and integration over there, but not for my kid, right? Or not for anything that might cause me trouble. Another response that's tempting is to pursue justice, to pursue generosity without pursuing justice. And so what I mean by that is that we can begin to support certain nonprofits. We can change the way we give our money. We can change the way we invest. We can, give even our time on the weekend to a nonprofit or to an underserved school or community. But we have to also pursue justice. We have to also do the work of dismantling systems and patterns that are really damaging to communities of color or to poor communities. And then finally, I think one of the tempting responses for those of us who are used to sort of being in control and taking charge is that we really focus on a solution. So we say like, I'm used to making things happen. I've got this great idea. I've got a lot of power. I've got like money. I'm used to being in control. People do what I say. And so we just decide I'm going to fix this thing in my city. But we skip the process. And because of white supremacy and its effect on our power dynamics and in the way that people are honored or listened to in our society, it's really easy to get very invested in solutions and forget that what we need to invest in also is a different way of processing. It's a different way of problem solving. It's a different way of approaching solutions. And so what we need to do is not just like take charge and fix things. We need to invite different voices to our tables and our boardrooms. We need to invite people's perspective. We need to decenter ourselves in ways, frankly, that can be kind of messy and long-winded and can take longer. But the tempting response is just to like fix stuff. And the better response, I think, is to value the perspective and interaction of other people. And so as we think about wrapping up last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, as we think about how we engage in becoming actively anti-racist, remember, we've talked about we need to learn to observe ourselves, like investigate our bias, notice when my good intention doesn't lead to the outcome that I thought that it would. That's par for the course. That's going to happen. You're going to have great intentions, but it will not actually honor or uplift the person that you thought it would. And so part of this work is to slow down and go, oh, okay, I had a good intention. It didn't work out. I don't need to get defensive. I need to pay attention to what actually makes you feel loved or included or gives you a job instead of just me intending to love you or include you or get you a job. We need to think about observing how we embody solidarity. We talked about that in week 2. And then to engage in empathetic listening. The real key here is that I'd love to just encourage us to lean in by finding your lane on 2 different journeys. One journey is the journey of systemic reform and institutional change. We cannot become an equitable society if we don't actually change systems that oppress other people, right? And so part of what we have to do is to engage in this bigger civic conversation and legal conversation about what institutional change is needed and how we can reform systems that hurt people. But the other lane is to think about how we can develop relational courage how we can listen with empathy, how we can pursue our past with humility and other people's perspectives with curiosity. And so I'd love for you to continue to think about, how can I engage in systemic reform and institutional change? And then how can I develop this relational courage and fortitude and empathy to approach other people? But I do want to be honest. In week 2, we talked about how sometimes when we approach others, we can sort of turn our back or shrug our shoulders or lean in and really get involved in the work of anti-racism. And I just want to reiterate one last time that when we decide to lean in, it really requires a sometimes painful decentering of my comfort, decentering of my power, decentering of my majority position, decentering of my whiteness and my ease with whiteness. And so I just wanted to be honest about our expectations, that when we are actually planning to decenter ourselves, we are deciding to be honest about our expectations. We are deciding that we really want to engage in messy work that might not have easy resolutions. We're engaging in work that's slower and harder and better, but slow and hard. We are expecting to squander our capital. Sometimes you will invest in things that don't work out. You will invest in a person that's not worthy, or that hits rock bottom again, even after you've poured all this into them. You are expecting, when you decide to lean in, to notice this gap in intention and outcome, that you can have the best intentions in the world and not see the outcomes that you're looking for. We're also expecting, when we lean in, to sort of get offended and be offensive, right? We're expecting to get our hands slapped, or to cause somebody harm when we didn't mean to. And then in our own circles, if you decide to lean into the work of anti-racism, you're expecting to be misunderstood and to even be doubted by people who really love you. That's the nature of living in a really racially distinct and hierarchical society. And so I wanted to be honest with you about the journey that I'm inviting you to join. That when you lean in, it is not, I wish I could say that it's all roses and that everything makes sense and that your sacrifice is worthwhile. But often that is not the immediate case. I still think it's worth it, but it's a hard journey that you're going to be entering. And so with all of that as sort of preamble, tonight I'd like to wrap up our 3 talks by talking about raising anti-racist kids and fostering anti-racism in our communities. And then finally, to get into some practical situations. I've heard from you that you are really saying, what the heck do I say when I'm around a belligerent boss, or a parent who thinks I've gone off the deep end, or when a friend uses coded or demeaning language. And so we'll talk about that at the end of tonight. So first, let's turn to anti-racist parenting. And I basically have come up with 4 principles that I want to offer you. And then I've got some thoughts below each one. But to begin this, I'll just remind us that in anti-racist parenting, the first philosophy of it, I think, is that to acknowledge in everything that you do that we are designed to be different. The difference is not bad. The difference is beautiful, and that we can learn from it. And so functionally, what that means is that for little kids, you want to denormalize whiteness in toys, shows, and books. It can feel radical to do this. So one of my children is Black, and when I was looking for baby dolls that matched her skin tone or that just weren't white, my parents, very innocently, said, why do you have to be so radical and find, a white or a Black baby doll? Why do you have to, why do you have to make a statement with the kind of baby doll you get your daughter? And that moment is just telling that we have so normalized whiteness and sort of centered whiteness that it's really easy for us to think it's like stirring the pot or rocking the boat, to just ask for a doll that fits a different shade of child, right? And so part of what we want to do is to denormalize whiteness with our kids, whether you have white kids or Black kids. Have all kinds of baby dolls, all kinds of books. And I have an attachment for this talk. If you're seeing this and you're not attached to our backyard conversations, then you can email me at expandyourus@gmail.com, and I'll send you the attachments. But I have a list of books that I suggest for people to use for kids, for tweens, for teens, graphic novels, all that sort of thing for kids. So part of understanding that we're designed to be different is to respond to observations of difference with enthusiasm, not with shame. So if you have a kid, you've been in a situation where your kid notices that someone in the grocery store, is older, or maybe is overweight, or is an ethnicity that they're not used to, or maybe even smells differently than you're used to, something like that, and they observe that loudly, right, in a way that embarrasses you. And so part of reiterating to our kids that we're designed to be different is just to be able to handle that moment without shaming your child and without like shushing their observation. And that's really tricky. But part of the way that we can do that is to say, like, I know, isn't it wonderful that they're different than we are? Or I know, isn't that fascinating that that their clothes are from their culture? Or isn't it great that we're all made in different shapes and sizes? So find a way to sort of, you can acknowledge the tension that comes when your child feels like they're the only one in the room who looks like them, if there is that tension, but also respond with enthusiasm, not just with shame. Practice curiosity in your own just sort of everyday life around other cultures, nations, languages, religions, ethnicities. If you sort of sigh and roll your eyes every time you hear a language other than English being spoken around your kids, then your kids learn English is the only right language and all the other languages are offensive, right? Or there's something wrong with those other languages. Another way to do this is to talk about differences that you notice even within your friend group or neighborhood, or friends who you consider to be really close friends. So I call this dispelling the same myth. It's very easy for us to assume and for our kids to live as if we're just the same as all of our friends from school who look like us, or our neighborhood who look like us, or our family, or our faith institution. But all those other people who look different are really different than we are. We're all the same, they're all different. And so part of what you can do if you want to engage in anti-racist parenting is to dispel that same myth. So instead of pretending like, yep, we already have immediate rapport with all these people who look like us, talk about the differences. Say like, I know we look the same, but like we actually approach life really differently, or like, we choose to live here and they choose to live there because we're different, or like, they parent really differently than we do, or their relationships are different than ours are, or they go on a different kind of vacation than we go on, or they, love different kind of movies than we love. Part of that work will help you model for your kids, oh, just because we look the same doesn't mean that we're actually all the same. The myth of sameness is not true. And somebody who is born in, Northern Africa, if you're in the US, could actually have tons of similarities to you. So that difference doesn't just fall around racial lines. So that's another way that you can promote the idea with your kids that you're designed to be different. And then finally on this, and this is rough, but it's just a gentle urge to sort of take the judgment down a notch. This is hard for me, but I think about it all the time when I'm, every time I get in the car, if I criticize all the decisions that my friends make, or, if we're just critical in general about other people, then that can lead our kids to think that our way is the only way. And that is just the opposite of celebrating difference. And part of it also helps us get rid of our critical natures, right? And so if we can take the judgment down a notch and observe differences and expect differences and recognize that we all are very different, I think that we'll be better off. Now, if you have teenage children, which I know some of us have, it is, some of you are having teenage kids who are like, you're a part of the system, mom and dad, or like you're oblivious, or you're old school, or you don't understand, X, Y, or Z. If you have kids who are in that boat, then I'll just encourage you, and this is rough because obviously we know more than our teenagers do, but it's just to take the judgment down a notch. Don't dismiss their journey. Your kids have to figure this stuff out for themselves. They're going to come home from their first semester of college with all sorts of crazy ideas. Or when they, turn 17 and 18, they're going to think that they've got life figured out and that we're all dumb. Don't dismiss their journey. Don't be ageist. Instead, if your kids come to you with like some radical view about anarchy, or about conservatism, or about, you know, all cops are bad, or like all people of color are bad, wherever they are. Don't be an ageist about it. Don't dismiss them. Instead, be an informed citizen. Ask them where they got their information. Ask them to teach you. Say like, wow, I've never thought that before. Help me understand your point of view, right? So don't be dismissive of your teenage kids and their passion. You obviously don't want to encourage destructive passion, but it's important, I think, to engage them and show them that you're a lifelong learner, just like you hope they will be. So the first piece of anti-racist parenting is that we're designed to be different, and that's a good thing. The second is just simple: be color aware, not colorblind. Stop saying kids are colorblind. They aren't. We need to respond to their observations of difference with celebrating their curiosity. Mention the good diversity of all of life experience, not just race, right? Like, don't keep emphasizing race, but notice race. It is not racist to notice racial difference. It is not racist to notice racial difference. When we shush our kids or look awkward when our older kids talk about racial difference, we're teaching them that it is racist to even notice such things. And it is not racist to notice such things. It's very, very aware, because race does influence the way people are perceived, promoted, accepted, included in our society. And so being color aware is really important. When you have younger kids, you can talk about spaces that are all white or that are not all white. You can talk about the choice to spend time in those spaces. You can talk about the difference in different spaces that are really diverse, and what that feels like. It's important to celebrate diverse color awareness, not to just talk about being colorblind. And then finally, as you're color aware, like, highlight and honor and celebrate a variety of heroes. Make sure that the only heroes you talk about are not just white male Christians, for instance, right? Talk about different kinds of heroes. Talk about, if you're a person who reads the Torah or the Bible, talk about the actual skin tone color of so many characters in the Bible and what they actually look like. Be color aware, not colorblind. The third philosophy of anti-racist parenting is that raising good people is not the goal. And so what I mean by this is that it is so easy to think, I just want to raise good kids. I just want to raise good, kind people. But part of what we're doing when we're just trying to raise good people is that we're reducing our own kids' prospects, actually. If we don't teach them to thrive in a diverse world, we're actually limiting their chances in life. Diversity is not just nice. It's a crucial life skill, and it strengthens the listener, the boardroom, the C-suite. It strengthens every table you're at when you really listen to and invest in perspectives that are different than yours. Another piece of this is to give them eyes to notice power differentials, exclusionary patterns, vulnerable people. Help your kids notice where power lies in rooms, right? And this, of course, helps as you have older kids who are starting to get jobs and things like that. But even for young kids, I used to tell my young kids, like, I don't just want them to teach them to be like a good person who sort of sticks in the status quo. I teach them, and sometimes they push back, that actually what I want you to do is to really be able to pay attention to, like, who's vulnerable around you and how can you let them know that you're on their team? How can you let them know that you're for them? And so part of the way we accomplish this, and not just raising good kids, good people is not the goal, is that we have to expand their exposure to people of color and to vulnerable people, from sharing resources until we're actually sharing coffee and sharing life. And so many of us, your primary exposure to people who look different than you or who live in a different socioeconomic sphere than you, your primary exposure is through volunteering or through serving them. And that is beautiful. That is raising good people who are taught that people are valuable even if they have nothing, right? And even if they need some investing in. But imagine what it would tell your kids if they saw those people sitting at your kitchen table, if they saw you seeking advice from someone who didn't look like you, if they saw you like asking questions of people who don't look like you. So we need to move from sharing resources to sharing coffee, is the way that I like to talk about that. The other thing is that just to teach our kids that they're responsible for what's said and done around them. A great place to look for this right now, I think, is in the bully curricula that are all over schools. In bullying now, they're helping kids understand that there's not just a bully and a victim. There's a victim, and then there's a person who will actually step in and intervene on the victim's behalf. There's a person who feels bad for the victim but doesn't do anything. There's a person who kind of hates the bully but doesn't do anything. There's a person who's like cheering the bully on in their heart without doing anything. And then there's the actual bully. And so part of that can be helpful in helping them identify their role, right? Not just with bullying, but with racist behavior and with bullying and excluding other people. Like, how are you responsible for what's said and done around you? And how can you lean in and help this? The final philosophy of anti-racist parenting is simply this, that it's a lifelong journey. I like to think that it's like the sex talk, right? It lasts forever. It's not just one talk. It's many, many, many conversations over 2 decades, probably. Well, maybe not that long, a decade and a half. And so part of the way we do this is that we're metacognitive out loud with our kids, which means we just talk out loud about the things that we notice. We talk out loud about when we feel uncomfortable and why we feel uncomfortable. We help them interpret what's going on in the world around them, and we allow them to interpret without editing them. Ask your kids questions about what they notice about school, about what they notice about other kids. Let them talk. Don't edit them. Let them share whatever they notice about the world and help them begin to process that. I think encourage knowledge and experience acquisition. So sort of reject the our way, only way thinking model that we talked about earlier. Allow them to really explore and experience different walks of life. Celebrate that. Don't say if it's not ours, then it's bad. The only way, though, that we can raise anti-racist kids is if we are anti-racist ourselves. We have to walk the talk. We have to model it. And part of that, too, is difficult because we have to acknowledge out loud to our kids that people that they love and respect might have really jacked up views on racial hierarchies. That's very delicate and very hard to do. But part of what you need to do is to help your kids interpret who they're taught to emulate, who they're taught to respect, who they're taught to listen to, right? And so if you have a family member who suggests things that you really disagree with in your anti-racism work, then you've got to talk to your kid about it, because otherwise they're going, well, I guess they're right about what they think about brown people because nobody ever confronts them or says anything, right? So you have to, it's a lifelong journey to talk to your kids about this. You have to keep talking to them. And then finally, I think part of the lifelong journey idea is that you need to, as much as you can, entwine American history with your own family history. And you talk about the story of your family, don't just tell a story of ascension where everyone wins and it's always great. Tell the story of struggles, right? Talk about your family's history and all the privileges that you were given and in all the struggles that you encountered. Talk about the help that you received. Talk about the help that you gave. Talk about the mistakes that you made. Talk about the reforms that you brought about. As a family and as a bigger American history, this is the truer idea of kind of who we are as a people. Finally, I was running last week and I saw this sign that said, drive like your kids live here. They're all over the place. And it just made me think, in thinking about anti-racist parenting, that we need to parent as if we're going to have a brown child or grandchild one day. We need to parent as if we care deeply for Black bodies. We need to parent like our kids are Black kids. If we do that, then we're reconnected to this we that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about, that Mother Teresa talks about, that we're all humans and we forgot that we're all just humans together, right? That we share these things. We have to parent as if we belong to each other. But I want to acknowledge that inertia often wins. If we do not take active steps to pursue anti-racist postures in our speaking, acting, habits, education, supporting, voting, engaging, purchasing, viewing, consuming, and all that we do, if we don't pursue anti-racist postures in those activities, then it is very likely that we will raise kind, generous, racist kids. And so I just want to acknowledge that it is very easy to raise good kids and good people who are racist because we never taught them about race in America. And if you really want to stop this cycle, then we have to talk about it. We have to engage in this lifelong journey. We have to be color aware, not colorblind. We have to understand that we're different and that different is good, and that we can learn from the differences that other people experience. We have to engage in these things if we want to raise kids who are not kind and generous and racist. So that makes a lot of us feel really uncomfortable, that I just acknowledge that we might be raising racist kids. And so I just want to stop now and offer a quick word about lines, because a lot of these choices about our kids come down to where our lines are and how we feel about our lines and where they land in our lives. We all have lines about when our sort of philosophies hit the actual world, what we'd like to talk about doing and what we'll actually do with our own kids or with our own money or with our own neighborhood or with our own education. And so I just want to acknowledge that lines matter a lot when it comes to kids. We can get really defensive about our kids, and all of our philosophies for a better future go out the window sometimes when it comes to our own kids. It's tough. And even my own family has worried at times that I was going to sort of sacrifice my own kids for my social justice passions, right? You get very worried about this kind of thing. And so I just want to acknowledge that if you don't set the lines for your own family, someone else will do it for you. If you really want to engage in anti-racist parenting, you have to decide what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Don't listen to conventional wisdom. So much of conventional wisdom is solidified through a long history of white supremacy, where we only think about our own comfort. And so I'm not encouraging you to sort of throw caution to the wind and just do the most risky thing possible. I'm asking you to take this seriously enough to name your lines and then act on them. Work through the fatigue, the anxiety, the loneliness, the judgment, and make small and big choices that align with your values. Since we cannot have actual discussion time together, I thought that I would have us pause here and round out this talk by reading to you from a little book called For Everyone by Jason Reynolds. He is a brilliant writer who has written a lot of tween and teen fiction, and actually just wrote the YA version of Stamped from the Beginning, which is Ibram Kendi's book on a history of racism and racial thinking in America. He wrote the version that's for kids. And he wrote this sort of poem, extended dream, thought process for whomever to read. And so I want to give us a chance to breathe, and I'll just lead us now in a breathing exercise, if that's okay. If you'd like to follow along wherever you are, you can just find a comfortable position where you can be attentive but very relaxed, and you can close your eyes if you're comfortable, or just sort of drop your gaze to the floor in front of you. And I'm going to ask us to inhale together and exhale. Inhale, drawing your shoulders up into your ears. And exhale, rounding them down and back as you feel your neck relax. Inhale, pushing your toes and heels into the floor, feeling how you're grounded into the earth. And exhale, offering gratitude for this moment that we're in. As your body returns to its normal sense of rhythm and breathing, as the breath just comes, whether you ask it to or not, the beautiful natural rhythm that your body's been given, allow yourself to give into this moment as I read to you from For Everyone by Jason Reynolds. The truth is, our dreams could be as far away as forever or as close as lunchtime. Tomorrow, you could wake up and read this letter on a billboard, or you could wake up and have forgotten who wrote it. It all just depends. Some say on skill, some say on will, some say on luck, some say on buck, some say on race, some say on face, some say on Sunday. God got a mighty plan, mighty plan. Nobody really knows what it depends on, but everybody knows it depends. So I went out and bought all the books on all the ways to make dreams come true, laying out the how-to, somehow spinning life into a fantastic formula for dummies and dream chasers written by experts and dream catchers who swear that I can 1 + 1 and right foot, left foot my way into fulfillment. Never taking into consideration all this mess I got strapped to my back and my head and my legs and my heart. And them books didn't bandage my flat feet, swollen from this journey. The pages didn't spin, nor could they be eaten to ease the hunger. Though I could curl up with one, I couldn't curl up on one and get a decent rest or respite from the hunt. Useless. I thought about burning them. At least I could use the firelight for this long and often dark road. One thing I am now certain of is that this road less traveled has in fact been traveled by more suckers than you think. All of us out here, slumped over, wearing weird fake names, broken smiles, trying to avoid the truth, that we all got road rage. We are all a bunch of exhausted stragglers, exalted strugglers, disciples of the dreamers who came before us, students of a different Bible, reading the book of the City of Angels and the Big Apple, an orange house in old New Orleans, a cheap beer and flat above a bistro in Paris. We are led by the Moses in our minds to the promised land. In our hearts, we know is real. At 16, I thought I would have made it by now. Now I'm making up what making it means as I go. But this letter is not about making it, because I don't know nothing about that. I don't know nothing about that at all. And then skipping ahead a little as you continue to breathe, I'll read this last page. This letter is for us all, to remind us that we are many, that we are right for trying, that purpose is real, that making it is possible. I'll repeat this one last time, and as I do so, I hope you'll inhale and exhale and commit to being a part of this journey. This letter is for all of us, to remind us that we are many, that we are right for trying, that purpose is real, that making it is possible. Thanks for joining me for this third session on anti-racist parenting. I'm going to add a fourth session on tips for having tough conversations with people who really disagree with you. And I hope that you have learned a lot. If you, again, would like the other documents or other videos that we are posting for the other two sessions, then please email me at expandyourus@gmail.com. I'm thankful for your time, and I hope to see you soon.